My name's Nellie, and growing up in our house was like living under constant surveillance. Dad was a professor, his life revolved around the university, and he expected nothing less from me and my sister, Anna. Mom was pretty much the enforcer of Dad's rules, always making sure we were the perfect daughters. It was a regular evening at home, and I was trying to finish a book I'd been secretly reading under the covers for the past week. The living room was buzzing with the usual chatter about Anna's latest achievements. She went to high school, and every day there was a new reason for our parents to be proud. Dad's voice boomed from the living room, pulling me back to reality. "Nellie, can you come here for a moment?" Dragging myself away from my book, I headed to the living room. Anna was sitting on the couch, grinning like she'd won the lottery, while Mom was passing around cups of tea. Dad cleared his throat as I walked in. "Sit down, Nellie. We were just discussing Anna's latest paper. It's been selected for the school's research journal. A significant achievement." "That's great," I mumbled, forcing a smile. Anna shot me a look, her eyes sparkling with that all-too-familiar mix of pity and superiority. Mom chimed in, her tone laced with that nagging edge I knew all too well. "Your sister works so hard. We're just hoping you'll start putting in some effort too, Nellie. We've yet to see you shine like your sister." I sank into an armchair, feeling the weight of their expectations crushing me. "I'm doing my best," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Dad's response was quick, his words sharp. "Your best? We expect excellence, Nellie. Not just best. You need to start thinking about your future, about making something of yourself." I wanted to scream, to tell them that I had my own dreams, that I hated biology and the sterile life they were pushing me into. But I knew better. Instead, I nodded, pretending to absorb their advice. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Dad's question wasn't really a question, it was an accusation. Anna just sat there, sipping her tea, the golden child basking in her perfect little world. I stood up, feeling the need to escape before I said something I'd regret. "I have homework," I said, turning towards my room. "Remember, Nellie," Mom called after me, her voice stern. "We're only hard on you because we care. You'll thank us one day." In my room, I closed the door gently, leaned back against it, and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The walls of my room felt like the only place where I could be myself, away from their constant comparisons and impossible standards. High school felt like a minefield. Each step had to be calculated, or else it would set off an explosion at home. Anna was already in college, the pride of the family, leaving me to navigate the turbulent waters of my teenage years under the ever-watchful eyes of Mom and Dad. One particularly drab Tuesday, I decided enough was enough. If I had to play the part of the obedient daughter, I was at least going to find small ways to make it bearable. That morning, before school, I slipped on a bright red band under my dull gray sweater, a small act of defiance, but it felt like claiming a piece of my identity. At school, I was a different person. I hung out with Max and Liz, a couple of outcasts like me who didn't fit the typical mold. We'd skip the occasional class to hang out in the old music room, where I could finally breathe. "Nellie, you coming?" Max nudged me as the bell rang for the next period. "Yeah, let's get out of here," I replied, grabbing my bag and following them. We settled into our usual spot, and I pulled out my hidden headphones, ready to drown in some music that Mom and Dad would never approve of. Liz watched me, an eyebrow raised. "Still hiding that stuff from your folks?" she asked, her tone a mix of amusement and pity. "Yeah, Dad would flip if he knew I was into punk rock. You know how he is about proper influences and all that crap," I muttered, fiddling with the headphone cord. Max laughed, shaking his head. "Man, your parents are something else. How do you stand it?" "I don't know. I just do what I have to do, I guess. Keep my head down, mostly." The conversation drifted away from me as I lost myself in the music, the lyrics pumping me up, giving me a dose of courage I desperately needed. Later that week, I decided to take an even bolder step. I'd been saving up from my part-time job at the local bookstore, a job Mom and Dad barely approved of, and bought a pair of ripped jeans. Hiding them in my bag, I changed at school on Friday, ready to feel a little more like myself. Walking home in those jeans felt exhilarating, but as I turned onto our street, my heart sank. There was Dad, waiting at the front door, arms crossed. Panic set in. I had forgotten he was home early on Fridays. "What on earth are you wearing, Nellie?" His voice was calm, but the disapproval was clear as day. "They're just jeans, Dad. Everyone wears them," I said, my voice small, bracing for the storm. "They are not just jeans. They are a statement, and not one we approve of. Go change. Now." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to yell back. "It's just clothes, Dad. It doesn't change who I am." He stepped closer, his presence imposing. "Everything you do reflects on this family, Nellie. Remember that." I stormed past him, slamming the door to my room behind me. The jeans were thrown into the back of my closet, hidden yet again. But something inside me had shifted. That night, I made a promise to myself. No matter how small, I'd keep finding ways to rebel, to be me. Even if it meant just a hidden streak of red or a song no one else knew I loved. When it was time for me to pick a university, the whole choice part was a joke. Dad had it all mapped out. I was going to the same university he taught at, just like Anna. The decision wasn't mine, it was handed down like a family heirloom I never asked for. The major? Biology, Dad's field. "It's a respectable field, Nellie, and you'll have a secure future," he'd said the night we talked about my so-called choices. The truth? I had no interest in biology. I wanted to study literature, lose myself in books and stories, not cells and organisms. But that wasn't part of Dad's plan. "Think about your future, Nellie. This is for the best," Dad had said that evening at dinner, his tone final. Mom just nodded along, adding, "Your father knows what's best, dear. Anna's doing wonderfully well, just follow in her footsteps." So, that was it. I enrolled in biology, and just like high school, college became another series of hoops to jump through. The first year was a blur of classes I had zero interest in. I'd sit in the back of lectures, doodling in the margins of my notebooks or getting lost in my thoughts, imagining I was somewhere else, anywhere else. One afternoon, I bumped into a senior student, Mark, at the campus cafe. He was a literature major, and we hit it off talking about a novel I had secretly been reading. "You actually like this stuff, huh?" Mark smiled, pointing at my biology textbook. "It's not by choice. It's complicated," I sighed, my usual defensiveness about my situation kicking in. "Sounds like a prison sentence," Mark laughed. "You should have gone for something you love. Why stick with something that makes you miserable?" His words hit too close to home. "It's not that simple. My dad's a professor here, in this department. I didn't have much of a say." Mark raised an eyebrow. "That sucks. But hey, maybe you can switch majors? Talk to someone in the lit department?" I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping. "You don't know my dad. Switching isn't an option. This is my life." As the year dragged on, I met with Mark a few more times. He became my window to the world I wanted to be part of. Through him, I got glimpses of literature classes, poetry readings, discussions that sparked a fire in me. But at the end of each meeting, I had to return to my reality, the world of biology labs and lectures that felt more suffocating each day. My last year at university was nothing short of a family spectacle, thanks to my sister Anna's grand wedding. She had recently introduced her fiancé to us, Michael, a lawyer 10 years her senior, working for a large corporate firm. My parents couldn't have been happier with her choice. He was exactly what they envisioned for both their daughters, successful, respectable, and financially secure. At their engagement party, the joy on my parents' faces was unmistakable. They had the perfect son-in-law. The wedding preparations were a flurry of activities where every detail, from the bridesmaids' dresses to the flower arrangements on the guest tables, was meticulously chosen by Mom. She relished her role, guiding Anna through every step, ensuring the day would be nothing short of perfect according to their standards. After the wedding, which went exactly as my parents had planned, Mom's visits to Anna became more frequent. She would often tell her how to manage her new home, advising her on everything from hosting dinner parties to managing finances, all the while hinting that I should start looking for a husband of similar caliber. "I hope you're paying attention, Nellie," Mom would say on her return from these visits. "You'll need to know all this when you find the right man. It's time you thought about settling down too." One chilly November afternoon, after another lecture I barely listened to, I decided to take a different route home through the old part of town. That's when I saw him, Jake, leaning casually against a vintage race car, a stark contrast to the world I was entangled in. "Nice car," I said, drawn to the bright red paint and the powerful engine sound. Jake looked up, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Thanks. She's a beauty, isn't she? Took me ages to get her running this smooth. Wanna take a ride?" I was just about to test her on the open road. I hesitated, glancing back the way I came. It would be so easy to just walk away, to return to the path laid out for me. But something in me rebelled at the thought. "Sure, why not?" I replied, surprising myself. It felt reckless, but exhilarating. The ride was liberating. The speed, the wind, the sheer freedom, it was intoxicating. For those moments, I wasn't Nellie, the biology student who was suffocating under her parents' expectations. I was just Nellie, the girl who could go anywhere and be anything. When we finally slowed down, Jake looked at me, his eyes curious. "You seem like you really needed that escape. What's your story?" I sighed, the weight of my world settling back on my shoulders. "It's a long one. Let's just say I'm stuck in a life I never chose." He nodded, understanding more than I expected. "I get it. I was there once, stuck, I mean. Until I decided to do something about it. Life's too short to live someone else's dream, you know?" Over the next few months, Jake became my escape, my slice of freedom. We met often, driving for hours, talking about everything and nothing. He showed me that another life was possible, one where I could make my own choices. One evening, as the city lights twinkled below us, he turned to me, serious. "Nellie, I don't want to be just an escape for you. I want this to be real, for us to take on the world together. What do you say?" Looking into his eyes, I realized this was it. My chance to choose my own path. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Let's do it. Let's be real together." The day I decided to introduce Jake to my parents, my stomach was a tight knot of nerves. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Jake, with his leather vest, black t-shirt, ripped jeans, and hair tied back with a simple string, wasn't what my parents envisioned for me. He was the antithesis of the clean-cut, suit-anti-professional, like my sister's husband, Michael. We walked up the driveway, and I could already feel the judgmental gaze that would come through the curtains. I took a deep breath and rang the bell. My heart pounded as the door swung open, revealing my mom, her expression transforming from surprise to shock in an instant. "Mom, Dad, this is Jake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jake stepped forward, offering a friendly smile. "Nice to meet you," he said, extending his hand. My dad looked him up and down, ignoring the offered hand. "What did you say you do for a living?" he asked, his tone harsh. "I'm a mechanic," Jake replied, undeterred by the cold reception. "I also race cars." Mom gasped softly, clutching her chest as if the words were physical blows. Dad's brow furrowed deeply. "A mechanic? And that's supposed to support my daughter?" I jumped in, feeling the need to defend him. Jake is amazing at what he does. He's passionate and incredibly skilled. Dad snorted, shaking his head. "Skills in racing cars? That's a hobby, not a career. What about your education?" Jake was calm, though I could tell he was starting to get annoyed. "I've completed specialized courses for my trade. I didn't go to university, if that's what you mean." The room went cold. Mom looked like she might faint. You expect to marry my daughter with no proper education? I love Nellie, Jake said firmly. I intend to make her happy. Happy? With what? Do you want to feel like a piece of trash in an old shabby apartment? Love doesn't pay the bills. Dad's voice rose, his temper flaring. I felt a surge of anger. I don't care about money. I care about being with someone who loves and respects me. I shot back. Dad pointed a finger at me, his face red. You're making a huge mistake. I won't allow it. We do not give our blessing to this farce. Mom's voice was shrill, panicked. You're not thinking clearly, Nellie. This isn't you. It's exactly me. This is who I am. Jake makes me happy, far more than any lifestyle you wish I had. I argued, my voice rising to match theirs. Dad was adamant. If you choose this man, you choose him over your family. We won't support this. If you leave with him, don't think you can come back. I took a deep breath, my decision clear. I choose us, Jake. I choose freedom and happiness, even if it means losing them. Mom burst into tears, and Dad's voice was cold as ice. Go then. And when he leaves you, don't come crawling back to us. I grabbed Jake's hand, pulling him toward the door. I won't. I'll never come back, I said, my voice steady, despite the tears I fought back. We walked out of the house, the door slamming shut behind us. The finality of that sound echoed in my heart. I had chosen my path, and as we drove away, I felt a mix of heartbreak and relief. The day of our wedding was bittersweet. I had secretly hoped that maybe, just maybe, my parents or Anna and her husband would show up, or at least send a card. But as the day went on, it became clear they wouldn't be part of it. The silence from their end was deafening, yet as I stood there exchanging vows with Jake, I felt a profound happiness that overshadowed the disappointment. After the wedding, life with Jake felt like a whirlwind of happiness and new beginnings. His passion for cars and his talent as a mechanic led him to pursue further training, specializing in servicing high-end, luxury cars. His reputation grew, and soon he opened his own company. It was a risk, but it paid off. Looks like all your hard work is really paying off, I told him one evening as we reviewed the company's growth charts. His face lit up with that smile that always made me melt. It's our hard work, he corrected me with a wink. Couldn't have done it without my top-notch dispatcher and business manager. Our personal life was equally rewarding. Jake's mom, who lived not too far from our new house, became like the family I had lost. She embraced me wholeheartedly, calling me her daughter, filling a void I hadn't realized was so profound. You're more of a daughter to me than an in-law, she would say, her warm embraces making me feel cherished and accepted. We would often have her over for dinner, or spend weekends together, exploring local markets or just enjoying each other's company. On weekends, Jake and I indulged in our shared passion for nature. We'd drive out in one of the sleek cars from his shop, always returning it spotless, of course, and find new trails to explore or quiet lakes to picnic by. These moments, away from the buzz of daily life, were our little slices of paradise. As our first anniversary approached, we decided to host a small celebration at our home. I handled the invitations, a pang of sadness hitting me as I realized I wouldn't be sending any to my family. Instead, I focused on the friends and the new family we had formed, those who had supported us and cheered us on every step of the way. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Jake and I were happily running our business, and our days were filled with a sense of accomplishment and contentment. My mother-in-law, who lived nearby, was a frequent visitor and had become like a second mother to me. Her visits always brought warmth and laughter to our home. One afternoon, she arrived looking unusually troubled, her brow furrowed as she took off her coat. There's a scandal brewing at the university, she said as soon as she sat down. It's all over the news. A professor has been accused of plagiarism and stealing someone else's scientific work. My heart skipped a beat. Did they say who it was? She shook her head. No, they didn't mention a name, but it's quite the talk around town. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. The university they mentioned was where my father worked. I hadn't spoken to him or my mother since the day I chose to marry Jake and leave my old life behind. After my mother-in-law left, I turned on the TV and flipped through the channels until I found the news. The reporter was standing in front of the university, talking about the allegations against a prominent professor. Then they flashed my father's photo on the screen. It was him. My hands trembled as I absorbed the news. His career, his reputation, everything was at risk. 2 weeks later, the issue was still a hot topic on the news when the unexpected happened. Jake and I were at our shop when I noticed a familiar car pulling into the parking lot. My breath caught in my throat as my parents stepped out. It had been years since I last saw them. The staff pointed them in my direction, and as they walked toward us, I could hardly recognize them. My mother had lost a lot of weight, her clothes hung loosely, making her look frail and aged. My father seemed a shadow of the man he once was, his posture slumped and his eyes lacking their usual firm resolve. As they approached, my mother's eyes filled with tears. "Nellie," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Mom," I replied, my voice neutral, guarding my feelings. "We need to talk to you," my father said, his voice low. I looked at Jake, then back at my parents, 1,000 memories and feelings swirling in my mind. I knew this conversation was inevitable, but I was not ready to simply let them back into my life without understanding their reasons for coming now, after all this time. "Not here," I said, indicating the busy shop around us. "We can go to my office." They nodded, and we walked to the small building next to the garage where I handled the administrative work. Inside, I offered them seats, but the air between us was thick with unsaid words and years of separation. Sitting across from my parents in the cramped confines of my office, the air felt thick with unsaid things and old grievances. My father's face was stern, etched with lines of stress and anger, while my mother appeared worn and anxious. "It was hard finding you, Nellie," my mother started, her voice quivering slightly. We've been through so much." My father's voice was gruff, his usual warmth missing. "I've been accused of plagiarism and theft of scientific work unfairly. I reached out to your sister's husband for help, thinking family would provide support without trying to make a profit from our misfortune." I raised my eyebrows, waiting for him to continue. "He wanted to charge an exorbitant fee," Dad continued, his tone sour. "Your sister sided with him, choosing her husband over her own family. So, we had no choice but to disown her." There was a cold irony in his words, a mirror to the past when they had turned me away for choosing Jake. "And now you come to me?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Yes," he said bluntly. "We need a place to stay. We've had to sell the house to cover legal fees. We have nowhere else to go." I couldn't help but laugh, a short, harsh sound that filled the small office. "You disowned me, remember? You literally cursed me, wishing I'd fail and come crawling back." The pain of that day, still vivid in my memory, surged forward. "And now you expect what? That I'd welcome you with open arms?" My mother's face crumpled. "We're still your parents, Nellie. How can you turn us away?" "Because you taught me how," I replied sharply. "When you chose your pride over your daughter, you showed me that blood isn't thicker than water, not always." Dad's eyes narrowed. "We are your family. You owe us." "I owe you nothing," I shot back. For once, Anna made the right decision, and I'm proud of her for standing by her husband. It's more than what was ever afforded to me. The room grew colder, the tension palpable. My mother began to shout, calling me ungrateful and heartless. Jake, who had been silent beside me, stood up, his presence commanding. "I think it's time for you to leave," he said calmly but firmly. He turned to one of our workers visible through the office window. "Make sure they don't come back here," he instructed quietly. My parents were left standing in the middle of the room, a final look of shocked defeat on their faces as we walked away. That was the last time I saw them. In the months that followed, Jake and I grew even closer, united against the turmoil that had tried to tear us apart. We welcomed a daughter into our family, a new beginning in the truest sense. My mother-in-law, ever supportive, was a constant help, showering her new granddaughter with love and affection. Life moved on, and the pain of the past began to fade, overshadowed by the joy of the present and the promise of the future. I had learned that family isn't always defined by blood but by the bonds you choose to nurture and protect.